Hi everyone, Mr. Boltri here bringing you video 6.1, the first video of Unit 6. We're going to talk about setting up the Unit 6 Introductory Lab in our lab notebooks. So first, to do this, you're going to flip to the next available page in your lab notebook, and at the top you're going to write Unit 6 Intro Lab or Introductory Lab at the very top. And as always, our lab is going to start with a question. And in this case, the question is, what is the relationship between blank and acceleration for a cart that is being pulled by a falling weight? And so now, in order to fill in that blank, you're going to have to remember back to class. And on your lab table, there were two options. You either got assigned option A or option B. For option A, you would fill in the blank with mass. So what is the relationship between mass and acceleration for a cart being pulled by a falling weight? So you'd want to keep that falling weight, you'd want to keep that force constant. And then for B, option B, some of the people are going to be doing a slightly different experiment. They're going to be changing the force to investigate what is the relationship between force and acceleration for a cart being pulled by a falling weight. And they are going to keep their mass constant. It's going to be interesting because then the different groups are going to have different results. We're going to be able to compare how those two results are different and kind of the interesting things that happen because they are different. So if you miss class or you don't remember which group you were, approximately it's going to be the red, lime, yellow, teal, and purple team on option A, blue, green, pink, and orange team on option B. But just kind of try to think about which team that you're at, and maybe if you're sitting at the green team but you're working with the red team, just make sure you get your option right. So you don't have to rewrite your whole lab when you come to class. So the goal is to come to class with your lab notebook set up to run your experiment, either option A or option B. So try to get it right, or we're going to have to rewrite your lab notebook or work with a different group, which honestly isn't the end of the world anyway. So just make sure you pick an option. Hopefully it's the right option, but get your lab notebook set up for the lab in our next class. So after we have the question, then we need to do a labeled sketch. And your labeled sketch should look something like this. And let me zoom in on this just so I can show you the most important parts. So we're going to have the motion detector, which is going to be important. I'll give you a big hint. It's going to be important in determining one of the factors in this lab. And it's not the force, because we're also going to have a force detector on top of the cart. We're going to have our cart, which is going to be on a level track, pulled by a string, which is attached to a falling weight over a pulley. So make sure you get all of those important. This is a very involved lab. There's a lot of moving parts. We got a force sensor, we got a cart, we got a falling weight, we got a motion detector. There's a lot going on. So that's kind of why I want you to be prepared to come into class and do a really good job with your data collection on this lab. So when you have a nice labeled sketch, then we're going to want to write a procedure. So I'm going to let you write your own procedure, since the procedure for option A is going to be different for the procedure for option B. But make sure you're very clear about what you're measuring and when, for example, and how. So for example, all of the groups have to measure acceleration, and I'll give you a big hint. It has to do with the motion detector. So what can the motion detector tell us that will allow us to measure the acceleration? And also, what are we changing from one trial to the next? So option A, you're going to be changing the mass. Option B, you're going to be changing the force applied. And just to be clear, this falling weight is the thing that's applying the force to the car. So you're going to change the how heavy the falling weight is. So be clear about what you're measuring, when and how, and what you're changing from one trial to the next. After that, we're going to set up our data table. And so here you're going to fill in, if you have option A, you're going to put mass. If you have option B, you're going to put force applied. Mass in kilograms, force applied in newtons. Make sure you don't leave this blank. Fill it in with the appropriate thing for your option. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to write down our constant. So for option A, since you're keeping the force applied constant, here you're going to put force applied equals, and then we'll figure it out when we get there. Then option B, you're going to say what your constant mass is. And then our graphs are going to look different for the different groups, and I'll show you how to set those up. And then the interpretation might be a little bit different for the different groups too. But we're going to linearize if necessary. And then once we get our data to be linear, we're going to write the equation for our line using appropriate variables like F for force, M for mass, and A for acceleration. And then we're going to interpret the meaning of the slope and the vertical intercept of our graphs. So this is what your lab notebook should look like coming into class, except you should have these blanks filled in. So for example, for option A, you can fill in the blank with mass. You should have mass in your data table. You should have your constant force applied here. You should actually write your procedure. And then just as a heads up, we're going to graph mass on the horizontal axis and acceleration on the vertical axis. So you're probably going to want to go ahead and label that just so you don't forget and have to ask me in class. And then for option B, we're going to do basically the same thing, except we're going to have force applied here and in our data table, our constant mass, and then we're going to graph force on the vertical axis and acceleration on the horizontal axis. So again, if you have option B, make sure you get that labeled so you don't have to ask in class. So once you get your lab notebook set up, you're going to be all ready to start the Unit 6 Introductory Lab, which we will run in our next class. But from now, this is Mr. Boltri wrapping up the video 6.1, and go Bears.